Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce you to Dr. Bryan Helsel. Dr. Helsel taught music in Pennsylvania's public schools for 26 years, serving as choir director at the Butler Area Senior High School for 24 years, where he also taught piano, music theory, and guitar, and created new curricular courses for such as recording and songwriting. Dr. Helsel also has composed several choral works and has released albums of his own contemporary music. He has appeared on public radio as pianist and most recently on NPR's From the Top this past May 2023. Dr. Helsel is lecturer recording artist at Youngstown State University, where he teaches courses in music technology, digital audio workstation lessons, operates a studio, and assists with senior projects and supervising recording internships. He earned his PhD from Kent State University, so we're very proud to have him back. And his concentrations, his emphasis is in choral conducting and curriculum design. His research interests include music ensemble travel, music technology, and music literacy. Dr. Helsel owns and operates a recording studio, Helsel Music, which is a full production recording studio. He resides in Butler, Pennsylvania with his wife and 2 children. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Helsel here to Kent State.
Well, thank you, Ricardo, and thank you, Nick, and everybody at Kent State who put this together. I was part of one of the original Arts Without Limits when it was called something else, and it was a little forum, and we just kind of sat in a tiny room and talked about what we did. So really excited to be back in this more formal environment and just sharing my story about entrepreneurism. I didn't really realize the degree to which entrepreneurism is embedded into my life and into my very person until I sat down to plan this session, and I went, wow, yeah. So I'll get into that a little later. For now, as Ricardo said, I'm a small business owner, performing musician, a studio musician, educator, church organist, composer, arranger, and recording engineer. Those of you that are music majors, you know that we're busy, and we tend to continue to be busy. How many of you are music majors right now? Yay. And how many high school students are thinking about being music majors in the future? Great, great, great. So glad to have you here. So with all that, my professional life is compartmentalized, but it's also very interconnected. So I taught music in the Pennsylvania public school system for 26 years and have been on the faculty at YSU teaching audio and music production for the past 2 years. I would not have been ready for that exciting position had I not opened up a recording business 20 years prior, having an entrepreneurial mindset. Not really knowing how to start a business, but definitely having a mindset of let's try some things and see what happens. So if you look up, one of the definitions of entrepreneurship is taking on financial risks in the hope of profit. And I prefer to think of those financial risks as investing in yourself. Not to downplay the risk, but if you can frame it as an investment, you'll certainly feel better about it. Obtaining a PhD at Kent State was an investment in myself for a chance to grow, and I think it helped to frame my mindset towards further innovation. So a few things that I want you to take away from this are, if the slide will advance, I got it. One, we all have a passion project, especially those of us in the arts who are predisposed to creative ideas. That passion project can become your entrepreneurial business, or it could be your side hustle that evolves into a business, but it is wholly yours and you have ownership of it. Two, being an entrepreneur doesn't always require that you're born with a silver spoon and have generational wealth as your startup funds. If you come from nothing, you have to create something. You have to be creative. My parents had very little. It's kind of a miracle that college was even available to me through scholarships and other means. And I'll explore that later, but growing up in poverty led to creativity. And 3, it's okay to have a day job. I listened to a lot of the speeches today and kind of was noting how many years before the person said, after this many years, I quit my day job. But it's okay to have a day job. I still have my day job, and I like it a lot. It's one that provides health care and a regular paycheck while you continue to work on your passion project. But keep working on that passion project. I'd like you to think about it right now, about what your passion project might be, while I tell you about mine. So here's a look at Helsel Music Services. I went too far. And so this is my current studio. It's the second, or I guess you could say third or fourth, depending on how you look at it. But it's really the second kind of full, large studio that I built. And when people enter on the left side, they're entering into a game room. There's an exterior door there. And so the first thing they see is like a fun zone. There's a pool table and a ping pong table and a bar and a big TV. But there's also 16 mic inputs in that room. So I'll often put the drum set there. They're loud and they're isolated from everything else. And on the right side, they'll walk then through a hallway. Where in the hallway, there's a storage room, there's a full bathroom, and then they go into my control room. This is mostly where I work. You can see the window I'm facing, working there. I've got 2 screens, and there's a third one. You're always renovating when you have a studio. There's a third screen that's about to go up on the wall above the panel of all the electronics there. So that's kind of the control room where I work, and I wheel around between the keyboard and all the equipment. And then this next photo is on the left side. I keep trying. Thank you. This is if I were to turn around in the control room. There's a comfy couch that folds out to a bed if anyone needs to stay, and there's a little kitchenette. And then through the glass, kind of in the middle on the bottom, is the performance space with a 7'9" Petroff concert grand piano. Control room has a whole bunch of mic inputs. The performing room here has another 16, and if you kind of take a loop, the next room is the gym, but it also serves as an overdub booth for vocals, also sound isolated. So just trying to use spaces in like multifaceted ways, but there's also 8 microphone inputs there, so I usually put vocalists, but I could put whatever I want there. And then there's another door that you would go through that would take you right back into the game room, so it kind of comes full circle with the ability to isolate sound, and everything's soundproofed. And when I was building it, I had my children in the kitchen above, just like asking them to scream as loud as they could, and they love that, just to check the sound isolation, and we really got it pretty good. So this lower level of the home can kind of function as a professional space and kind of a fun space. I think entering into the game room is nice because people get relaxed, and I didn't want to move that yet, sorry about that, because people, I think I did it, because people want to be relaxed and want to be set up to have a fun recording session. There's a lot of pressure on them. They're spending money to be there, and we want them to feel relaxed and able to do their best work. So that was the second studio that I built. I learned a bit from the first one. I bought my first home in 2003, and my search criteria there was that there would be space to create a studio. As soon as I started paying on my first mortgage, I took out a business loan to renovate the entire basement that would become my studio, including a large sum for that 7'9" concert grand piano that would attract some important clients and serve as a wonderful instrument for me. My master's degree is in piano performance, so it was good to finally have an instrument that I could play. As I was practicing for master's recital, it was all done on a keyboard. To save money on this venture, my father, who worked in construction, would come to my house twice a month, teach me a skill, and then he would assign me homework. One month I was framing walls. Another, I learned electrical wiring, and I got shocked too many times to mention. Later, I would learn to install insulation, soundproofing, hanging drywall, finishing drywall, trim work, and so on. I spent nights and weekends building my first studio while working as a full-time teacher and performing as a gigging musician. This work started late in 2003 and was completed in October 2005 when the studio finally opened. My dad never voiced his concerns while he was helping me build this, but I learned years later that he had doubts about whether this business could ever pay off the loans I accrued. I just had the mentality of, if I build it, they will come. And they did come. Thanks. There we go. And they did come. Here's Still Life, a band that recorded with me in 2018 in the original space. I offered an introductory rate for the first few bands that came to record, half price for all services, while I learned the equipment and improved my efficiency and skills at operating it. Word got out, and more bands, individuals, and small ensembles came. Quite a few times a school bus would actually pull up to my studio, which is just in a residential neighborhood, and I would record a high school chamber choir of 32 singers. As word continued to spread, I got quite busy. I was making quality recordings and looking to further improve what I was doing. Clients wanted CDs back then, and while I could still burn CDs for them, I was frustrated with putting sticker labels on the CD. I didn't like the way they looked. So in 2006, I remember spending $6,000 to buy a thermal CD printer that could print in full color in a way that the ink could not be scratched off, and those labels would sometimes cause the disc to spin in an unbalanced way. So now my products look professional. I even bought a shrink wrapper and devised a template for making CD cover art. Where was Canva when I needed it back then? It makes it so easy now. For a while, though, to make that, I was just cutting with scissors individual pieces of paper and folding them and slipping them into the jacket of the CD. And so I eventually found a machine that can kind of do that in one foul swoop for me, and really just trying to figure things out, continuing to grow this business, continuing to sort of define what this business was going to be. I was still then teaching full-time, having my day job that I like, playing trumpet in a semi-professional brass quintet, and in a community band, and playing piano in the Butler Symphony Orchestra, gigging all over the Pittsburgh area. And the latest thing that took off was that music education organizations like PMEA, OMEA, and many local universities and high schools, they wanted to contract me to record their concert series. Some of you may have been part of the district orchestra or choir or band, and you've seen the mics up when you go to your concert. And I've been at hundreds of those, dozens of them. I've been the guest conductor on stage, but hundreds of them I've been the recording engineer, and probably another 50 or 100 I've been the guest accompanist at the piano. So I've definitely feeling at home at PMEA and OMEA events. But it's been very fun being the on-location recorder for those. Those gigs, those on-location gigs, got to the point where right before the pandemic, I was triple booked a lot of days. I had bought several mobile rigs so that I could hire other engineers to go and capture the on-location recording, and later I would create the CD materials and do the mixdown. So most of you who are music majors are studying education, performance, or technology. There it goes. And many of you will work for someone or for an organization. While it has been a lot to juggle, I've been blessed to have a steady job in education that provided health care. Because I'm both employed and self-employed, I still have to pay the federal self-employment tax, and I have to carefully keep track of everything I earn while self-employed and all the deductible expenses as well. And I recall hearing presenters throughout the day going, "Oh, taxes." And yeah, it's like the non-creative part of what we have to do, but we have to find ways to connect our left brain and right brain as we become entrepreneurs and business owners. Sometimes it feels like keeping track of these things is another job entirely. I often reflect on how busy my life was as a music major, and you guys know it or will know it. There were days that I was booked from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. with no breaks, just classes and other obligations as a music major, and then still I'd be in the practice room for hours after that. It did, however, prepare me for this double life that I lead. More often than not, I find myself leaving work and going to a recording session either in my studio or on location somewhere. Thus, as I hold a steady job and work on my passion project, I'm still booked from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. It's all good stuff. It's worth it, and I love it. Because I lead a busy life, I often just go wherever my phone tells me to go. And when I get there, I sing or play piano or record something, whatever my phone tells me to do. And when the pandemic began, I think everyone has also mentioned the pandemic today. It changed business, it changed music. But music was hit really hard. Everything was canceled. So I remember how my heart sank with every phone calendar notification. Now my phone was telling me to go to previous bookings that I knew were canceled, and I wasn't going there. So when teaching school was canceled for those first 2 weeks in March of 2020, I went right to work. Prior to this, I had created a website where choral directors and students could find rehearsal resources. I had pre-recorded thousands of songs where learners could click on the soprano part or the alto part and so on. So students and teachers could access these and click on the specific parts and learn to prepare for upcoming rehearsals. You see a screenshot of one of those rehearsal sites on the screen. Since upcoming gigs were canceled, I took this as an opportunity to sort through my archival materials and make them available. This yielded some passive income as directors were looking for ways to keep their rehearsals going, even while learning remotely, and during a time when active income for in-person recordings was non-existent. Building upon that, I found clients who needed remote mastering services. They had recorded things on their own and they needed some help with making those recordings sound good. So I worked on those recordings for them, met with them on Zoom and via email, and kept the business moving. It seemed like that pandemic was going to be a time where either a business would fail or it would prosper, and music was hard at the time, but I was determined to find ways to make it prosper. I was also looking for ways to keep music happening for my students. So I knew that while my audio knowledge was solid, I needed to suddenly become competent at video editing. That became my job during the summer of 2020. I learned Final Cut Pro. I put advertisements on my website saying that I could bring your music ensembles together remotely in virtual choirs, bands, and orchestras. I suddenly found myself operating an international business. I worked with a choir in Canada, a collegiate band in California, and a middle school wind ensemble in Korea. I was holding Zoom meetings, listening parties, and bringing people together at a time when they could not physically be together. So I'll show a little of a few of these. The first one that will come up here, this is middle schoolers from Korea, and here they go. I'll probably need you to advance it though. See if it will let you. Yeah, go to the next one. Thank you. It's 7 minutes. I didn't want you to have to hear the whole thing. And you probably can't tell by watching, but every single one of those students are in a different location, on a different track, with their instrument not necessarily tuned in the same way. So they all had to be tuned. They all had to have noise removed. Wherever they decided to be in their location, dogs are barking, or like I had students outside and cars were going past, and it was a huge challenge to try to get that to happen. So is it not advancing? There we go. That's perfect. That's perfect. So I'll see if I can advance it one more. This next, it should just start playing. It worked at home. Yay. So this next one is a collegiate band from California. And this was a completely different experience because I needed to create the MIDI version of how this would be. And then the conductor told me how he was going to conduct. And I had to sync everything to his conducting. And then he has a conducting video that his students followed. And then later I took their audio and turned it into what this will be. Conga del Fuego Nuevo is just a really fun piece. So here's the Humboldt State University Wind Ensemble performing that. It's again 7 minutes. I won't give you all of it. Some of them are playing multiple parts. You see the same face up there a couple times. It's either a different instrument or a clarinet 1 and clarinet 2. Perfect. That was their concert. I did a couple with them and a whole bunch of these throughout. It takes a lot of time to put that together. And since then, I've found other techniques and other ways, and could have made it even more realistic if I could have had everybody with a green screen behind them. And but it was really fun learning that process and just learning different video effects, and I really enjoyed it. But it was just a sense of pride knowing that we can bring people together in a time that we couldn't be together. And I think those skills are still gonna be needed in a lot of different ways. So I remember the first calls I got for in-studio sessions during the pandemic. I hadn't been in public and hadn't risked infection to my family, but people were adamant that they wanted to record and that we could stay distanced. So we managed to use the communication system in the studio in ways that worked while distancing. I still had concerns, especially prior to vaccination, about my microphones in the room, but we did it. One of my favorite pandemic recordings was this one. We recorded this on location at the family farm where these girls lived, and we'll play a little bit of this. No, we won't. I don't know how that, here we go. I think I got it. If we can, I don't want to play the whole thing. That was such a fun recording. I just took a whole bunch of equipment, a piano. It was at least 300 feet away from their house, and we plugged into a barn, and we had a lot of extension cords and a lot of things. Those girls were 14 at the time. Both of them are now music majors, one at Slippery Rock in Pennsylvania, the other at Liberty in Virginia. And the sound, considering there was wind and that we were in a cornfield and that we were absolutely in the flight path of the Pittsburgh International Airport, and every 6 minutes a plane would fly loudly overhead, and we just had to go, stop, we can't use that one, let's try again. We had a 6-minute window for every take. Really proud of how that ended up turning out. And that was their audition for The Voice or for one of those shows, and they did get accepted. And so they ended up turning down the gig once they found out what the requirements of those shows were. But super talented kids, and it was really fun doing that. So another thing that the pandemic taught us is that we don't have to go back to doing everything live. There are some meetings that never need to be in person, and that creates job security for some tech-minded people. One radio show and podcast with a large international audience followed that model. In early 2023, I was contacted by leadership from Public Radio International program From the Top. The model of the show is that young musicians, usually ages 7 through 18, are brought to an audience in Boston where they amaze the audience and the radio listeners on NPR affiliate stations with their prodigy-style talent. During the pandemic, these performances occurred remotely, and they continued in that fashion to save on travel and other costs. So the prodigy, in May of 2023, happened to be a young Pittsburgh singer, and the show contacted me as the recording engineer who would bring this performance to the radio show. There are a lot of recording studios in the Pittsburgh area, and I'm an hour north of Pittsburgh, and one of the reasons they found me was that Petroff piano that I have in the studio, and they also had heard other recordings that I had done. Well, one benefit that I offer to anyone in the studio is that for no extra cost, I'll play piano, trumpet, synths, or sing on their album, and I often end up playing on everybody's album in some way. And so I ended up being the accompanist on this broadcast as well as the engineer. How cool to get 2 credits on this popular show. You can find the recording and performance on the NPR website and wherever you get your podcasts. So I've told you of some of the successes of the business, but there have been some failures as well. I've worked with memorable clients and forgettable clients. I don't know if this qualifies as memorable or forgettable, but I'll always remember the client that never was. This happened more than one time, but the client didn't show up, and I'm calling and no one's answering, and I finally get an answer on the phone number that I have for the contact for this person, and his girlfriend answers and says, "Oh, he's in jail. He's not going to make it." And sad to say that's happened a couple times. So not a memorable client, but a memorable experience. And, it's a loss too, because that session's never going to happen. I bought some equipment and tried some recording techniques that were just flops, just wastes of time and money. But that's another way that we learn and we grow. I also decided during COVID to create some music-themed hygiene products. I mean, I was looking for any way to keep the business afloat, and I thought these were kind of cute. And I had made prototypes and tried this thing. I was like, for some reason, into essential oils like everybody was in 2020. Maybe eucalyptus cures COVID. And so I put them on my website. I even created an Etsy account. Pretty much no one cared. Like, nobody wanted these. I think they're cute. They all have poems on them. The chapstick on the left, the poem says this: Chopin had chapped lips, but Mozart's were moist. Music Health Lip Balm was his lip balm of choice. If you plan to get kissed, or if your lips have an itch, try this lip balm. It has perfect pitch. Nobody bought it online. I did sell a few of these on location gigs, like I was recording a band concert, and trumpet player needs their chapstick, so that was great. You see the deodorant one on there as well. Its poem goes like this, also a failure. Musical deodorant, like wearing synesthesia. All natural ingredients, the scent is sure to please ya. Stay fresh all day long and listen to your song. You can be melodious instead of just malodorous. And even if your music stinks and your notes are fraught, even when your tunes run out, your deodorant will not. Nobody wanted that. I can't believe it. The other item is soap in the shape of music notes, and the other is poo spray for your toilet. So I think I'll spare you the poem for that one, but you could buy one. They're still there. They're still on sale. It seems to me like my non-musical ideas are the failure ones. When I became a parent, I got more entrepreneurial ideas. Like, I didn't realize how inconvenient it is to strap a child into the child seat when it's raining. So I fashioned like a piece of hardware that would connect to your umbrella and then have an arm that would go to a magnet that would magnet to your car and keep you dry. So that's not a failure yet. I'm still working on that. If I can find a way to Shark Tank that, then we will. But it is that entrepreneurial mindset of, I need a thing, I can try to make a thing, and maybe sell the thing, or maybe I just have the thing for myself, and that's okay. Being a performer is also part of my passion project, so I'm still on the failure topic. One of those examples is I was booked with an agency to play piano for a wedding, and the wedding took place at an actual castle somewhere in southwestern Pennsylvania, near where the Steelers rehearse in the off-season. I was told what to play, and I was told there was a beautiful piano in the great room. So when I made the 90-minute drive, there was no piano. I had some lead time, but not enough time to go home and grab a keyboard. And so I was relegated to playing a CD for the bride with the songs. It was humiliating. Lesson learned, though. I always carry a keyboard and an amp, even when they tell me that there's a piano there. So as a music educator, it's a pet peeve of mine when people tell me they don't have any musical talent. They don't have it yet. They simply don't have a growth mindset, and they're selling themselves short with aptitude and potential. If it were true that our talent level was fixed and set in stone, I'd be out of a job as a music teacher. We all would. That said, it is true that there is indeed some natural talent in some people. It can be developed and improved, but some of it is there. And I think the same can be said of entrepreneurship in general. Having an entrepreneurial spirit or mindset comes naturally to some people, but like music and the arts, it can be learned, taught, and developed. So I said earlier, if you come from nothing, you have to create something. My dad had a small construction business. We were poor, food stamp eligible, but too proud to use them. So my mom raised kids while growing an epic garden. While my dad had a business, I think it was my mom's entrepreneurship that rubbed off on me. Everything we ate for a number of years was from that garden. She canned things to get us through the winter, and she made so many things. When in 1983, when the Cabbage Patch doll craze hit America, and every little girl had to have one for Christmas, and they got very expensive, my mom sewed one for my sister. I wish I had a photo of hers, because it could have passed for the real thing. The real thing's not that attractive anyway. These sorts of acts of love continued through our youth. When I graduated high school, troll dolls were popular, and so my mom made one with a Westminster College band uniform and somehow with a trumpet to celebrate that I would be moving on to play trumpet in the Westminster Band. So I went to college having witnessed the example of, if you want something, you can just make it. And maybe that's why I make chapstick now. Dad built houses, and my mom made just about anything you could think of. Here's a sample of edible arrangements of fruit that my mom has made. To buy some of these would cost hundreds of dollars. I checked, but she just makes them when people ask her, and she only charges them the cost of the grocery bill for fruit. Here's another one, I believe. And then here's what she makes for my kids when I'm away. This was breakfast. So then when I go to make my kids breakfast, it's like scrambled eggs or something, and they're like, why is there no face? Where's the fish? Where's the bunny rabbit? And there's a gazillion of these, and they're all so creative. And I can't keep up with that, but I write them songs. They have lullabies and they have songs. When I was young, my dad invented a game. It could have been sold like an Amish game sometimes does. It was a 3-tiered wooden structure that had a marble, and it had to navigate through a series of holes to eventually reach the destination hole. Nothing ever came of it, but he was trying to see if he could mass produce this idea. We were a family of entrepreneurs, but lacking in business acumen to make much profit from the ideas. That's where college comes in. Any of you that are music majors, if you can spare the credits, take a business class and learn how to market your ideas. I was self-taught in recording and in business, although I incorporated as much of both as I could into my master's degree at Duquesne University in piano performance. It is amazing that you can start with nothing, find ways to learn skills on your own, and then eventually, as I did, wind up teaching those same skills to college students 20 years later. My parents tell the story of how when I was 2 years old, I went to Sunday school and heard the songs they were singing and then went up to the piano and played them. I don't have any memory of this, and maybe they were just bragging. Still, the pastor's wife made certain that my parents enrolled me in piano lessons. I hated it, but I was good at it. As a young kid in the 80s who watched too much TV and too many video games, I'm going to walk over to the piano. I didn't want to play what the piano teacher wanted me to play, which would be better on the harpsichord back here, but they asked me to play a lot of Bach, and I didn't want to do it. I wanted to do that kind of stuff, because I was playing a lot of Mario Brothers at the time. And there's something about it, I was just able to hear it and play it. And the Bach, I could not. I had to sit there and work and listen and practice, and it just wasn't fun for me. And my parents were not musicians, so they didn't know. They just knew that I had to practice an hour a day. They didn't know what was good practice, and they didn't know the difference between Mario Brothers and Bach. So once I realized I could fool them into thinking I'm practicing, I would fail my piano lessons, but I could keep my parents happy, and just thinking that they were the ones that were paying for the $5 a week for the piano lesson. So the creativity that engaged me in figuring out how to do that and figuring out how to improvise definitely helped me without having a formal knowledge about recording or a formal knowledge about building a business. I was improvising and learning how to make this happen. I remember the first business cards, speaking of Mario Brothers. I made business cards on a computer in 1985. They said, Bryan Helsel, Atari expert. It had my contact information, my parents' phone number. Atari was an early video game console featuring classics like Pac-Man and the original Mario Brothers. I had it in my head in 1985 that somebody would want to watch me play video games and then have me teach them how to win. Where was YouTube and monetized plays when I needed it back then? I could have been a child millionaire, but nobody cared about that at that time. Throughout high school and college, I worked as a lifeguard and swimming instructor, revolutionizing the swimming curriculum by incorporating singing and music into the lessons. The kids loved it because I spent most of my time at that swimming pool, and I had connections there. So I created a concert series. I put together a band, and we played my original music. I had recorded an album one summer while working there, so these cassette tapes were on sale at the main office, like the one with me with a mullet sitting alongside the Allegheny River. My friends who checked in people at the pool would sell them and would invite people to my live performances. Again, didn't know how to make a business, but I was just kind of trying things. From that, I made enough money the first summer to pay for the recording fees for the album on the left and to pay for another album to be recorded the following summer, the one on the right. Once I had those cassette tapes, I began sending them to record labels and publishing companies. I found a book that explained how to send unsolicited recordings to people who would listen to your music back in the year 1994. 10 years later, a MySpace page would have supplanted the need for any of this. But I had sold enough cassettes that I could afford the postage to send more cassettes to a lot of places. I collected a mountain of rejection letters, a few acceptances, and quite a few scams. The scams at the time were usually somewhat innocuous and easily detectable. We like your music. Send us $100 and we'll put it on a compilation album. It'll be released next year and maybe you'll get radio airplay. I think I got a check one time for 13 cents for a song that aired a few times. Cost more to mail the check. I remember one of the rejection letters very clearly because I read it 100 times and maybe cried a few times. It said, "You should give up music and become a farmer." It said that after a few other quips that were clearly crossing the line between trying to be funny but also insulting. This was 1994, and I wish I still had the letter because I'm fairly certain that it came from someone who would become quite famous 8 years later as a judge on a new show called American Idol. I do think I received a letter of rejection from Simon Cowell. Wish I still had that. But I learned to take it in stride and become resilient. I was trying to be a songwriter and a rock star, but cognitive dissonance. I was also in school training to be a music educator because that was what college had to offer you in those days. I'm so proud to currently be teaching students how to write and record pop music, and what I would have given at the time to be enrolled in a program like the one in which I currently teach. During college, now around 1995, I set up a very simple early website offering musical services to anyone who called. Sure enough, someone called my college dorm landline phone number, and they wanted me to create a karaoke track for the NSYNC song, "God Must Have Spent a Little More Time on You." I didn't have any recording gear other than a MIDI keyboard and a cassette deck, but you have to start somewhere. I was able to listen to the song and then play all the parts on the onboard sequencer on the keyboard. The client's daughter was going to sing the song for some event, and the client mailed me a $20 check, and I mailed her the cassette. I got the feeling that this new internet thing might catch on and that it could be a good place to start doing business. Like I hope you do, I continued to invest in myself and my passion projects. A few years later, instead of just investing my minimum wage lifeguarding earnings into recording gear, I was a new teacher, investing those earnings. I had a 2-bedroom apartment, and I decided the second bedroom would be a small studio. I found ways to bring some of the new equipment to school and demonstrate concepts of music technology to my students. They enjoyed those lessons, I think, a lot more than regular general music classes or rehearsal-style lessons, which got me thinking about what kinds of curricular possibilities there could be with music technology. I joined the organization Time, Technology and Music Education, and I changed jobs to a new school that was interested in offering technology. And in 2003, created one of the first recording classes in the area with startup grants from the Chevy Corporation, among others. After 6 years of teaching, I had completed my master's degree and was looking to build a bigger studio and therefore looking to buy a house. Helsel Music Services would occupy the lower level of that house. I would live on the main floor, and the unfinished attic upper floor would become another passion project. So when I was not teaching, recording, or performing, I took my newfound construction skills and slowly over a decade built what would become Evergreen Escape, a fairly popular Airbnb that occupied the upper level of my home. Sorry, I'm just trying to change this. Not succeeding. Thanks so much. And it also encompassed the 4-acre property where couples came to get engaged, celebrate anniversaries, and even a few weddings. A popular feature of this Airbnb was the library, which you can see there. It was wall-to-wall books, but what you can't see is there was one secret bookshelf that opened up to a secret office room that was behind it, and that was a huge draw for the Airbnb, and just kind of like a Scooby-Doo thing that I wanted to have in my house, and it was super cool. So this work on the upper floor and improvements made to the home more than tripled the value of my house during my time in it, which allowed me to take that project, that profit, and buy the dream house. And this is where my current studio is, for my family and for my studio. Having also built a solid relationship with Airbnb, we were super hosts. I created an Airbnb experience where clients, even those with little or no musical talent, they could visit the recording studio, spend an hour singing a karaoke song, and leave there with a project. And if they like, they could spend the night. I got excited by the idea of connecting with other companies. I became a studio affiliate with Disc Makers, a company that duplicates recordings. Being passionate about the environment, I became affiliated with the CD Recycling Center of America. Through them, people would bring me their old CDs as streaming became more popular, and I would ship them to the CD Recycling Center. They would strip off the ink and the lacquer of the disc and then recycle the plastic. I've used the word passion a lot of times, and I think it's important because it is your passion that will drive you. Unfortunately, it will drive you crazy sometimes, and it will drive you through a lot of uncertainty and plenty of ups and downs. Following that passion, you need to be adaptable to the technology, the times, the changes in tax code. Finally, you have to know how to learn and embrace the idea of being a lifelong learner. If I didn't continue to learn, I would still be making cassette tapes for clients. So thank you so much for your time in hearing my story today. I urge all of you budding entrepreneurs to engage with your own passion project, and I hope you've kind of been thinking about what it is or what that could be. And there is no telling how you might harmonize innovation yourself. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Bryan, for that, for walking us through your journey and that motivational, endless numbers of activities that kept you driving and to be where you are right now. So we'd like to open the floor for questions from the audience. Does anybody have a question for Dr. Helsel?
So I'm currently like in between majors. Like I want to do music, but I also want to do production. And I've heard like the adage from my parents, "Oh, don't go into music. It's not gonna make any money." So what would you say to people that are still looking? They want to follow their passion, but they also want to make money.
Yeah, that's definitely the conundrum. And I looking back, I'm so impressed with the support my parents gave me, and because I remember their conversations. And their apprehension at, oh, he's going to be living here forever in our basement, but that wasn't the experience. If you were here throughout the day, you heard a lot of people say, I lost this job, but then I freelanced, and I lost this job, and then I did something else, and the resilience kind of was the theme throughout the day of my colleagues who spoke here. I think that you're getting a college degree, first of all, is super important. It's not the way for everybody. There are trade schools and all those kinds of things, but you're here, you're getting a degree, and I would encourage you to do that. Regarding going into music, I think there are more opportunities now than ever, especially that you can get a formal education in music production and audio production, and there are a lot of things that you can do. In every syllabus that I give to my YSU students, I list, and it's a whole page long, I list some jobs that you could have. And I remember when I was in college, that was not a page, that was you're a music teacher, or you play organ in a church, or you're a performer, and that was kind of the list. But now you can generate. I just saw a job posting, and I'm always looking at them because I'm trying to encourage my students to apply. There was one recently from Mattel, like the maker of Barbie, and you're kind of like the guy who generates little MIDI compositions for pull the string, and the doll walks and it plays whatever it plays. The job pays $60,000 a year, and you're just kind of generating MIDI versions of things that are going to be in these toys, which I think is really necessary because a lot of the toys, I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, a lot of those toys are so flawed in terms of the scales they use and like all of the things. So I'm glad they're looking for, but so anything from that to sound for video games, and right now augmented reality and 3D kinds of things. Meta is looking for all kinds of audio engineers to help with the design in those kinds of things. So I think you think out of the box, but you can have jobs where you do work for a company, you do have healthcare. I think the hardest thing is that your skill set is still, I can't teach it all to my students, even in the curriculum that we have. There's much that still needs to be learned and still needs to be kind of learned on the job. I took my students just yesterday to travel to a local venue, and we met with the person who does live sound there, and she said to us, yeah, my degree was in video editing, and I learned this, and this on the job, and kind of figured things out. So it's kind of such a broad field now. You can do a lot more than teach private lessons or than play organ in a church. So I say go for it, because that degree in music, whichever variation of music you'd be going for, that's your passion, and it's going to give you the tools you need to create your passion project. I say go for it, but I mean, I can't not stand here and say follow your passion. So, yeah, anything else?
Anybody has questions? So I have a two-part question. So you've talked about passion, about learning new trades, about self-study, take another course. Are there any other, or is there any other advice that you'd like to give our current students and our future, hopefully Kent State students, about that, developing that entrepreneurial spirit? I mean, you go from your experience, from where you come from, and then the other part is, where do you see your recording company in the future? Because it seems like you're constantly thinking and working, your wheels are turning.
Okay.
So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, that's great. The first part, I would say, and this might sound, but do the work right now, because you're in. If you're a college student or even a high school student, you're in the best time. You have more disposable income probably than your parents do, because you don't have any expenses. And if you have, like, I was a lifeguard and I put all that money into my passion project, that was not a lot of money. It was like $2,000 a year, but that was what I had. So while you're in this position right now, do the work. Like, spend those 4 hours a day in the practice room when you can, so that all the scales and arpeggios are in your fingers, so that you can hold space for the other thoughts and the ideas that you have. Like, if I have to play in tenths, an E-flat harmonic minor scale up and down at tempo equals 160, I could run over there and do that and not think about it. But I still need to keep that in my fingers. So it's like honing your craft. I thought about that as a teacher too, because thank goodness I did all that, because little did I know I was going to have to be playing piano with my foot and my one hand, while conducting with the other, while writing detentions and dealing with behavior and managing all the things at the same time. You find yourself multitasking, and like I said before, maybe taking a business class, but a lot of that can be learned. But learn spreadsheets. I usually use Google Sheets and don't have a massive set of software that I use for that, but Google Sheets have been sufficient for me. But get in the habit of keeping track of things. You might not currently have to deduct anything or deal with all that, but just get for your own data. How much you played a gig? How much money did you make? Versus you also went out to dinner after that gig. Are you a net negative or are you a net positive? Kind of think about all those things and start to get into that mindset by living that and by doing that. I'm trying to encourage that in my students. I'm seeing that they all have a little kind of side business that they do, and one of them is, and I try to get them work too, because things that annoy me that I like, I'm starting to turn down things. This will lead into your second part of your question. I don't love these gigs where the mother comes to my studio with her 14-year-old pageant princess, and both the mother and the girl are freaking out because the pageant people have, anybody a pageant person, they have told the kid that if it's not 90 seconds, if it's 91 or 89 seconds, she's out. And so I have to very carefully make that edit and do all those, but I don't love that. And so I'm trying to give those gigs to students, and you could, if you do that on a national scale, and I tried to challenge them, and I said, hey, if one of you builds a business just on that, you've got a business that could probably sustain you. And I've built a business, part of which is on these honor choirs and honor bands and things happening, and just tried to follow what's changing about those, because we're not doing as many CDs, we're doing MP3s, we're doing downloads. I had to learn a lot of aspects of copyright, making sure that I'm doing that in a legal way, making sure that I'm paying people. Where the business was headed in 2019 was definitely to a point where it can't all be me. But I'm also not ready to hire a full-time employee. Just like I said, the construction of the business was mostly me with some help from my dad. But if I hired contractors, that was going to be exorbitant costs. So now I do have subcontractors, people that are recording under me, and I'm paying them, but it's sort of gig work. And I see more and more of that because now I've got 3 and 4 things happening at a time. So just last weekend I had to be in State College while I also had my microphones in Butler, Pennsylvania, which for some reason everybody knows where that is now, and it's a lovely town. But that was difficult, and growing it, I think, there's a point at which it could grow beyond me, but if it grows too much, it might lose my identity. So what I'm not doing is, like, Google sends me notifications all the time, like, hey, do you want to do more advertising? I don't do any advertising because I've got enough clients and enough people, and that's a great thing. But eventually I want to retire from some of the things and just have my business. For a long time, I really did want to, just like a lot of people today said, I quit my day job in this year. That's kind of what I wanted to do. But just the fact that I have healthcare and a steady income and a retirement is so attractive that I really like this balance that I've got right now. So Helsel Music Services is growing, but to be honest, I'm still learning the business part of it, and I'm not sure how to make it grow outside of me, but still have my own moniker there on it.
We have time for one more question, maybe? No? Okay, they'll tell me no. So thank you again for being here. Thank you, Dr. Helsel, for such a wonderful presentation. And I encourage you to visit or email him if you have any questions, any follow-up questions. Please do not hesitate to do that. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you.